Okay, about 100 years ago, essentially the Smithsonian, or the U.S. National Museum of the insect collection here, was basically ground zero for parasitic wasp research. Some of the most famous hymenopterists have all worked here, and they've dealt with very small wasps this entire time. But back 100 years ago, there were two major limitations when it came to doing actual taxonomy of these wasps. The microscopes themselves did not quite have the magnification or the optical quality we have today. And if you wanted to photograph one or illustrate one, there was no scanning electron microscope. They had film cameras that had rather limited applicability when it came to photographing something through a microscope. So everything was done by hand illustration. And we have, to this day, all these hand illustrations. So there's all kinds of technological restraints then that we have been able to shed these days. We now can take images very quickly. We can illustrate them using a computer. We can copy and paste. The whole concept of copy and paste, in my mind, has revolutionized how we do systematics in general. To be able to copy text, to be able to copy images, to be able to copy part of a drawing into another drawing without having to redraw the whole thing is absolutely phenomenal. And it's fun for me to look back at my predecessors here at the museum and to be at the same spot in the same building working with the same specimens, and in this centennial year think back of looking at the same wasp, in fact, through this system that William Ashmead 100 years ago would have looked at the same wasp. In fact, he put his name on it. You can see his handwriting on it. I wish he could see what we could do with his same specimens that he worked with. I think he'd be pretty happy. I think 100 years from now, these are always fun science fiction kind of questions. I can only, based on what I know, what's the kind of emerging technologies that are coming out right now, the concept of three-dimensionally rendering specimens for examination, based on the original model specimen, if you will, I think is where the field is going to be going. There's some work already done on larger things like locusts or bumblebees, where the same kind of series of focal planes that I've demonstrated here can be done actually through the animal using like CT scanning technology. The problem is they haven't been able to adapt the technology to do the same thing on an organism that's a millimeter long. I think that's going to change. I think there will be technology to actually look at the internal anatomy of one of these wasps without actually taking it apart, by using differential density of tissues inside the animal, and give us a real-time, or not real-time, a kind of a virtual image of what the tissues look like on the inside without any actual special preparation. I think that's definitely going to happen. I think also how we examine specimens, we're not going to have screens like this that we look at pictures on. I imagine having a hologram, three-dimensional projection that comes up in the middle of your research space that you could project maybe over you or over your desk. And as you can rotate this specimen, you can turn it any direction you want. You can maybe color certain things. If you just want to look at the mesosoma, you could have it colored certain ways, or certain plates on the mesosoma if you're doing some sort of counting. I imagine doing this all in a space and moving it with your hands. Having some sort of infrared field that can detect the position of your hands and change the position of the animal in space, so you can kind of handle it the way a human being's normally used to handling something. I think it's very foreign to look at a screen at something. To actually handle it in your own hands, I think, would be fantastic. And if we have the technology to scan a specimen, to get a model, a visual model like that, the next logical step is to actually produce real models, like actually have them fabricated out of like a polymer resin, have them carved into something you could actually hold in your hand if you wanted to demonstrate the anatomical relationship between certain structures. To actually have a physical model you can hold in your hands and hand off to the next person. Hey, what do you think about this? I think that's a next another obvious step. Being able to make decisions very quickly on what species you're actually looking at is critical, not only in situations of conservation. Maybe a company wants to put a road through a part of the Amazon rainforest for commercial purposes, and you need to do an impact assessment immediately. How many species do we have here? How many of them are rare? How many of them may be extirpated if this road goes through it? Well, if you had the ability to image stuff on the spot, send those images to specialists, you could get an answer, well, maybe not like the snap of a finger, but a lot faster than it would be to collect the area, do a biodiversity assessment, have all the specimens mounted, labeled, etc. The other major application that I deal with on a routine basis is identifications of pestiferous or possibly invasive species to the United States. I work in conjunction with APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, at ports of entry to the United States. When they suspect a shipment coming in, say, from another country, is infested with a potentially invasive species of ant, say red imported fire ant, they often send me, they collect specimens, put them in a preservative, and these are sent here for my identification. That takes time. And meanwhile, a shipment of, say, a perishable good is waiting to be unloaded at that port. But APHIS wants to make a sound decision on whether or not to let that in or not, because we don't want to bring in more invasive species than we already have. That threatens our own agricultural commodities. If they had a system like this that could produce these kinds of results, that any technician could put a specimen under, take a photo of it, and email me that photo, or any other means, satellite uplink, whatever, any way that that image data can get to me, then I can make a decision immediately and say, yes, that is red imported fire ant. Do not let that commodity into the United States before it's been treated, or maybe turn the ship around, send it back, make the commercial packing company that sent it here, put it on them to clean up the specimens or the samples before they get sent in. Now that is something that can result in millions of dollars on an annual basis being saved, and also help protect our natural and agricultural resources of the United States. I take that very seriously, and I think this type of technology is changing how that policy that APHIS has preventing invasives coming in, how they implement that policy. This type of technology allows us to document exactly what specimen the DNA sequence data was generated from, and those images can be linked directly to the sequence data held in like GenBank or in BOLD, the Barcode of Life database, and those two then can be linked to Encyclopedia of Life species pages. So having a visual as well as the sequence data, as well as the actual description, the textual description, those are three major components, I think, that all species pages in the Encyclopedia of Life could eventually look like. And I think now we have this kind of technology to do that on a very efficient pace, and something that can keep up with species discovery and hopefully species conservation.